I figured out how Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark will make his big MCU return and still be Iron Man after Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. Hey everyone, Colton here, and Robert Downey Jr. is back on set as Tony Stark, and this all but confirms that Marvel has more plans for RDJ's Iron Man after Doomsday and Secret Wars, such as an Iron Man 4. And guys, this all connects back to this moment in Avengers Endgame. So where is all this coming from? Well, there's a new promo video out for a ride coming to like Avengers campus or whatever in California, Disneyland. And on set, filming for that ride, we have Robert Downey Jr. reprising his role as Tony Stark, but he is also working alongside a Sam Wilson Captain America. So let's watch the clip and then we'll talk about how this is basically confirming that Marvel wants Downey back as Tony Stark in the post-Secret Wars MCU.
Welcome to Avengers Campus. We built this place to recruit, inspire, and train the next generation. You're a big part of that mission.
Rolling, here we go.
It's showtime, Jarvis.
Let's go. Open a portal to Cap. What took you so long? Shuri, get him out. No teammate left behind.
All right, so a little background here. Downey, he has had an interest in doing this ride for quite some time. He even had this big meeting about it with Bob Iger years ago, where they entered the planning stages. And while I do fully understand that this is a ride, it's not MCU canon, but we do, purely from a business perspective, have to come to the obvious conclusion that Marvel has no immediate plans to recast the character of Tony Stark. You don't invest hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars into this ride, this theme park attraction. You don't film this footage of RDJ back as Tony only to then introduce a new actor as Tony Stark in your cinematic universe in 3 or 5 years. And by the way, I don't know the timeline on this ride, but I would assume that it's not going to be up and running for at least another 2 years, which would be after Avengers Secret Wars. If they had any immediate plans to recast Tony Stark after Secret Wars, they would not do this ride because it would be counterproductive. Investing money into a ride prominently featuring Robert Downey Jr. playing a character that died on screen 7 years ago, hasn't been seen since, and will supposedly never be seen again, it just doesn't make any sense. So now with that out of the way, and we can safely assume that the rumors are true, and holy fucking shit, Robert Downey Jr. is going to rejoin the MCU as Tony Stark Iron Man, when and where does this happen? How do we feel about it? Is it a good idea or a bad idea? And what does this mean for his take on Doctor Doom moving forward? And guys, before we continue, I did want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, Free Cash. Okay, so I know what you're thinking, right? Free cash, there's gotta be a catch. And honestly, that's exactly what I thought, but the business model is actually pretty simple. Brands already spend huge amounts trying to get you to play their games, download their apps, or try their products. Usually they pay for an ad that you immediately skip. But Free Cash, they're basically flipping that. Instead of the brand paying to interrupt you, you can get rewarded for actually trying the game or app. And no, this isn't replacing your job or making you rich overnight. Think of it more like getting a little something back for stuff you're already doing. You can also earn through surveys and, where available, cash back. Just make sure app tracking is enabled so your progress actually gets recorded. The minimum cash out is $25, and my link gives you a $10 bonus after you complete your first offer. So if you're already gaming or trying apps anyway, you might as well see what's available. So be sure to check out Free Cash, the sponsor of this video, link in the description below. So first, I want to say that I think it's a pretty safe bet that we see Tony Stark in Secret Wars. I don't really want that. I've said that I don't think it's a great idea. I've said that I don't think that that's something they would do. They already found a great way to bring Downey back into the MCU without undoing his sacrifice in Endgame or having him play Tony again by just being like a Tony Stark variant from a different universe. The angle of him instead now playing the villain, a complicated villain like Doctor Doom, the idea of Tony Stark perhaps having always been biologically a Von Doom, it's great. But what I've heard many call for and speculate will happen is an RDJ Iron Man versus an RDJ Doctor Doom. And while I don't want that to happen, I didn't think that was something they would do, I'll admit it's looking like, yeah, that's probably what they're going to do. In fact, spoiler warning, if you don't want to know anything like connected to leaks and whatnot, we did cover a recent leak for, I believe, the Secret Wars plot, claiming that Robert Downey Jr., yes, is going to be back as Tony Stark in Secret Wars. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but essentially that leak claimed that we would see Battle World, which is the world that Doom creates after the multiverse collapses, and I think it would exist within the void at the end of time, and we would see kind of like a kingdom of sorts ruled by Doom, and there'd be like different boroughs, different locations in the kingdom, and the leak claimed that in Battle World, in the void, we would meet a drunken Tony Stark in a bar in Battle World. Now, where I want to get a little bit theory time with this is, what if the Tony Stark that our heroes find in a bar, drunk, sad, defeated, what if he's a Tony Stark that lived an identical life to our Tony Stark, the 616 Tony Stark? For all intents and purposes, he is the 616 Tony Stark. In fact, kind of like how the two Lokis, we've got the God Loki and the Loki that died at the hand of Thanos in Infinity War, those two Lokis lived on the exact same timeline up until the point of Avengers in 2012, when we saw in Endgame where he gets the Tesseract and escapes. That's where that timeline split. Up until that point, those two Lokis were the same Loki. They lived on the same timeline. So I'm saying all that to say that what if the Tony we meet in Secret Wars is a Tony who is our Tony? He lived on that exact same timeline, and he merely splintered just moments before dying in Endgame, and that is where that timeline split. What if there is a Tony Stark who failed to get the stones off of Thanos, and Thanos was able to do this?
I will shred this universe down to its last atom.
If Thanos shredded their timeline down to atoms, essentially pruning it, where would all that matter go? Well, a lot of it would just be destroyed and, as he said, turn to atoms. But as we know with pruning, objects, landmarks, and people can also wind up landing in the void. What if the Tony Stark that we meet in Avengers Secret Wars, this drunken, defeated Tony who is miserable and has regressed back to the Tony that we knew before his immense character growth that we saw him have in the Infinity Saga? What if this is a Tony that lost everything because in the final moments of Endgame, when it was time to sacrifice his own life to save the universe, he failed, resulting in everyone he loved being reduced to atoms and the entire universe being destroyed? That is a dope way to bring back Tony Stark because it does a few things. One, it fits well with the whole theme of the multiverse saga and things we've seen happen with other characters and worlds dying, stuff like that. But it also makes it to where this variant Tony Stark is pretty much the exact same Tony Stark. It's not this other world variant, really. It's the exact same Tony that we know and love and have followed for all of these years on that exact same timeline, just short of a few seconds prior to his death, where this Tony didn't die because maybe he couldn't make the sacrifice play and lay down on the wire. Maybe instead he thought,
I think I would just cut the wire.
Or perhaps it's a Tony that tried to do the sacrifice play, but he just failed to get the stones from Thanos. But honestly, I think a Tony that is the exact same as ours right up until that moment where Strange holds up the finger and Tony's looking at him like that. I like the idea of that being the moment where the split happened. It's a Tony that thought that he could maybe outsmart his fate and still get to have that life and still get to watch his daughter grow up and whatnot. And so he chooses to not make the sacrifice play that he knew deep down he needed to do. I would find that to be far more interesting from a character perspective. And it would really play into that guilt that he would be feeling, knowing that he needed to do one thing, but he thought he could outsmart fate and save the world, beat Thanos, and still get to go home.
Isn't that the why we fight? So we can end the fight, so we get to go home?
If we find that Tony in the void, drinking his pain away in a bar in the outskirts of a kingdom led by his variant self, Doctor Doom, and then he needs to step up and help reform the Avengers, but first he needs to be saved, and then help them take on Doom and look himself in the eyes and have this war with himself. That all sounds great. And again, I love the idea of learning that Tony Stark in every universe in which he exists is a Victor Von Doom who was adopted. Does that therefore mean that there would be no universes where Tony Stark and Doctor Doom both exist? Yeah, I guess so. But in a multiverse situation on Battleworld, you get to see Iron Man and Doctor Doom clash. Just they're from different universes. Now, where do you go after that? Say you bring back RDJ's Tony Stark Iron Man in Secret Wars. RDJ, he isn't getting any younger, but I've always liked the idea of just keeping him on as Doctor Doom because, I mean, there's really no reason that he couldn't do it another 10 years at least, assuming that he remains in decent health, which I think he would. The character is under a mask most of the time, and any physically demanding things could be done by another actor. And the same is really true for Iron Man. All the physically demanding stuff that Iron Man does is CG anyway, and I think Downey could totally keep playing Tony Stark for like another 10 years or so. Yes, that does get into him being in his 70s, but maybe a Tony Stark in his 70s would kind of be a cool thing to explore. Now, there was also, of course, the option of just recasting Tony in the reset universe post-Secret Wars, and Kieran Culkin would be a great choice if you ask me to play the character, but I've never really been on board with recasting because I think Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth should totally stick around after Secret Wars, and it's looking like they most certainly are. And so if you do that, and you have this new cohesive universe where Steve Rogers, portrayed by Chris Evans, and Thor, portrayed by Chris Hemsworth, still exist, having a new guy playing Tony Stark, that would be kind of weird. I mean, you have a Spider-Man in this universe who is going to be around for a very long time, and his entire origin is connected to Downey's Tony Stark. So then having him interact and be in the same universe with this other Stark recast Iron Man, I don't know, that just gets kind of too weird and convoluted. So if they do find themselves in a position where it just becomes too much of a headache to recast Tony Stark because you want to keep around these other actors, you might as well just let Downey keep playing him if he's interested. And while you're at it, why not do an Iron Man 4? A movie that would without a doubt clear $1 billion at the box office, and honestly, I think it would probably clear $2 billion pretty easily as well. And it would be a great movie to have for your new RDJ Tony Stark Iron Man centric ride at Disneyland and likely soon Disney World. But hey, those are just my thoughts and theories. I would love to hear yours down in the comments below. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. I've been Colton Ogburn, and I will see you next time. Bye!